And good afternoon, or I suppose in some places it's still morning, like here, and for you. Gita, what time it's 11 o'clock where you are, correct?
Love it here. Yep, right at the
You're
tip
on
of.
the exact same time zone. Amazing how that works. 1,000 miles apart, same time. Um, I'm super excited about this. We are back. I will simply say we're back by popular demand.
Yes, I like it. Yep.
We did a session, how long ago? About a month and a half, maybe?
Yep, I think so. Back in
A
July.
month and a half ago. And we kind of just introduced the concept of the fact that humor is around us all the time in every aspect of life. And we just don't talk about it enough as a tool and something that we can use in the workplace. And brings peace into the moment. It's inspiring. It creates connection. It helps with collaboration. It helps with getting to know each other, right? That was a big part of our conversation too last time. So we're taking it to another level today, and we're going to get a little deeper. But before we do that, first of all, how are you doing? How's life? Let's start with a quick. What's new?
Yeah. For me, yeah,
Ooh.
good. I'm coming off the heels of like we said, the US Open, and I mean, personally, I'm about to go into running season which, just to be a little nerdy, we won't talk about this for long, but I race, and so I run race, and so I've got races every weekend, so I'm getting down into like hyper focus mode with that. So that's always fun because you kind of have to work hard, play hard, but anyway.
That is true. It's something you are. So everyone, thank you for the community too, who always show up and support our conversations. And this is Gita. You probably remember her from, again, like I said, about 6 weeks ago. But I want to say something that you just reminded. There's a quote that you have. I think it's linked, to you and linked to your company. Though you're the founder of Humor Edge, and it kind of what you just said reminded me of this. And I'm going to quote it now. Life is too short and work is too long not to laugh.
Right.
I
Yeah.
love that. I mean, it's simple, it's powerful, and it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. And humor, it's also efficient, right? I mean, it does so much. And like, I think I am, I'm an efficiency expert through and through. And where I study it in the unit of self, and I study in the unit of systems and people and organizations. And I just feel like it's, to your point, like we exist. I think sometimes existentially, we kind of forget that, yeah, we're all here to, live better lives, but we're here to really connect as humans. And I think that's something we lose sight of. And it's like oxygen. It's something we need for survival. And I think some of that was illuminated very strongly in the pandemic, but yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Well, it's very true, and I will just let the community know if anyone sees me ever distracted or looking around, it's because we're on a brand new version of Crowdcast. And for many of you, you probably recognize that. It looks different interface. So I am sort of learning a little bit as we go. And so when there's a mess up or I make a mistake, I'll just use humor to get through it.
Right.
I'll just
I
make
love
fun of myself as I do often. So far, so good. I was just making sure I could see the comments as they come in. And I think I have that set up, but we'll navigate through that and see. So today there was, we talked about Gita, what we wanted to dive into, and the title of today is "Learn and Laugh in the Face of Fear." And the first topic we wanted to address, and I want to really just put the question to you first, and then we can kind of dive into it. But it is, how do companies use humor to communicate with confidence in uncertain times?
Yeah.
And when we were prepping for this, you had some really fun examples, powerful examples, meaningful examples. So I wanted to just start with this. How do we use humor as a tool to communicate with confidence during challenging or uncertain time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to bring up what I think is the most prime example of this. We've all gone through uh, the pandemic, right? And that is probably the epitome of the most uncertain time, when none of us really in our lifetimes have had to navigate something so uncertain. And um, if you and we're doing this, even, we use the pandemic as a pinnacle event, but there is so much uncertainty today with, what, with technology, with just things that are going on in the world, markets, economic things that are happening, that this isn't just uncertainty that you're going to see at like a very, let's say, strong, pronounced level like you would the pandemic. But these are tactics that I'll talk about is tactics that you can use in the everyday of your uncertainty in your own businesses, right, or in your own teams and production of projects, right. So the example I'm going to use is coronavirus.gov, and I will say that people and companies who use humor may not or may be intentional about using that humor, but it really goes far. And the things that coronavirus.gov do, and companies that use humor when they're trying to navigate through uncertainty, is there is what you would see as somewhat of a pattern. First, they do use it to garner attention, right? This works so effectively because people are in a place of chaos and pandemonium, right? And when you're in that place, you need to shake and break that cycle. And the way to do that usually is through levity and lightness, not more doom and gloom, right? You need to move towards a positive feeling. And so humor is a great tactic to kind of just grab attention. That's the first thing that gets established whenever you illustrate and evoke humor out. And then it captures them, right? So now you've commanded attention. The second thing that people do when they're trying to communicate during this time of uncertainty, after you grab that attention, is to evoke a relatability aspect, right? You're like, oh, whoa, I get what they're talking about. I'm going to give you an example of this with coronavirus.gov. And then the third thing that happens after that is that you kind of move in and you're like, okay, I've got them. I've got their attention. I've got their, relatability. So they're kind of with me now. And I can come in and establish like a line of trust through logic, through whatever it may be. So coronavirus.gov, right there at that time, if you kind of bring yourself back to the world of the pandemic and how we were always watching Dr. Fauci on TV and we were trying to look to some voices of reason, they really kind of took that moment to say, okay, we've got to be authoritative in this experience, and we've got to be, we need to capture people's attention to kind of establish some good social norms. So some of the things that they would do is they had these really brilliant ads that they would go out and post. Very simple, very poignant. So example, act like 90% of belly buttons. Stay in, coronavirus.gov. Act like a Red Sox fan at a Yankee game. Practice social distance, coronavirus.gov. Act like you have an ankle monitor on. Stay home, coronavirus.gov, right? Act like your ex just walked into a party. Practice social distance, coronavirus.gov. So that just gives you kind of a little bit of texture as to, they're trying to get you at, I just lost you.
You lost me?
Well, I lost your, oh, here you are. Okay. Sorry. I was reading from my monitor just because I wanted to give you good illustrative examples, but, yeah. So, I mean, you think about it, it's very, they were just simple white lettering on color background that just said those things. Yeah. And they were really out. You could relate to a lot of those things, right? If you were a Red Sox or a Yankees fan, or if you were, staying away from your ex, had a tenuous situation with your ex. These are things that you would really, they hooked you. That was that second element I talked about, right? Which is captured me. I kind of laughed. I got it. I related. And then we moved into the jugular and I said, yes, I want to capture you with stay in, coronavirus.gov. And the other thing that is so strong and effective about this example that I'm using is that the market, your audience, will pay dividends for something that you don't expect from that naturalized audience, right? Or from that communicator. So coronavirus.gov, we would not like, it's not normal to hear something like funny from the government, right? And so it's kind of
Yeah.
off, it's woo, and so that really kind of, it kind of stops you in your tracks.
Well, I think it's important to know too. I mean, you bring up obviously, the coronavirus, the pandemic, and that was challenging for so many people, from small businesses to people obviously who lost loved ones to the economy. But
Yes.
the fact that we were using humor to get people to stay safe, it was never. And this is an important aspect of humor. It was used in a way that wasn't meaning to not take it seriously, right? It was, we can still be funny about something that is
Right.
really challenging and that is tough and that is hard. And it's not disrespecting what people are going through, or it's not, suggesting that we're making something, making a funny joke about when your ex walks in, or Yankees and Red Sox fans. We are just leveraging humor to impact change, right? And so I think, but sometimes, and this is just the way it is, any good comedian, any good humor will offend somebody.
Right.
I always say, that's just the way it goes. But I think those examples are great, because this, at least in my lifetime and probably your lifetime, this was probably one of the most, wild 2 to 3 years that we've ever lived through. We had to, at some point, start to use humor to really get people to understand the importance of what's going on, the importance of change that we're asking for. So, and applying that to organizational culture, there's challenging things that are happening, but it's okay to present it in a humorous way.
That is such a great point, Dan. I love, we're not making fun of the thing like the pandemic, right? Or coronavirus.gov was not making fun of the pandemic. They were actually saying, okay, what's my call to action? And then how can I like you make
Right.
that fun, right? And that's a really great point when you think about communications and use of employment of humor through communication and
Yeah.
messaging, is that you're not satirizing or satirizing the situation or the project at hand. I'll bring this back to like work, right? So we're not satirizing that this is a ridiculous project. We are, especially if you're going to pick up the humor wand in your business and you're with a team. Think about that issue and what the call to action is, and then think of how you can bring that call to action into like a humorous light. So that we're kind of taking a fractional section of that and saying, okay, I want to bring humor to that experience, right? Like if I want to, we have to go out as a company and we need to innovate and provide a new product, and we need to do this by Q4 and bring it out to the market, right? It's a stressful project.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make fun of the project, right? I'm going to think, okay, how do we get to the finish line? Maybe it's the hustle bustle, or there's some play off in that, right? That's the place where the humor can be applied, is like, okay, what's my call to action and how can I make that funny, right? So there's just distinguishment there. Like you said, you want to respect the problem and the true realities of the situation but think of like your call to action and go, how can I make my call to action kind of funny, right? So lots of examples there, but I'll kind of keep.
Yeah, I love that. And we talked about this a little bit too, and when we had a call, just prepping about our conversation today. It's also, there's always that fine line between using humor too quickly because you don't want to deal with something, or it's easier. And I'll use a relationship example. Something's tough in a relationship. Everybody's had something tough in a relationship, right? And sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure I would guess most of you who are listening are guilty of this. Sometimes when you're not ready to talk about it, or you don't want to, or maybe it was your fault, you're the person who sort of needs to respond to it. You go to humor to try to just lighten the moment, but maybe the moment is not ready to be lightened yet, right? And then eventually you can start to introduce humor, maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's this idea of, and I think that's where just sensibility and using humor as a tool. And if we talk about humor as a tool, you don't always use the same tool over and over and over again, right? You use a
Right.
tool when you need it, and that's how humor should be applied and used.
Yeah, novel, right?
Yeah,
You do use it at like if you're constantly in there as using the same tool. And I even remember the example I gave you where coronavirus used it to establish attention and to evoke relatability and then to go with trust. Like you have to be pretty particular and not use that all the time because it kind of what's the word commoditizes your humor, right?
yeah,
As a
great. Oh,
delivery.
that's great. I love that. You're right.
Uh,
That's
yeah, so it's really it's you use it sparingly. Funny enough, like Allstate, Progressive, a lot of these insurance companies in recent years, you've seen like the rise of flow and all these. Allstate has this kind of
yeah,
there's the gentleman who says that we do this and that. So even they know that, and we come back to that efficiency ratio. Like I've got time is money. I've got to put ads out. Humor is my go-to emotion because I know I can capture them. And you see, they're following that same script. They're capturing you with humor. They're kind of putting a ridiculous situation. I think there's some dog or some fire or something of the sort. And then they would come in
yeah.
and he would say, okay, you relate to this to some degree. And then they would go in and get Allstate does this, right? So it's like, this is a very scripted, intentional way to really be effective with your humor. But anyway, so.
I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, in Super Bowl ads, right, are a great example of that. I mean,
Yes.
that's sort of like if you think about how much companies, as we know, have to pay for Super Bowl ads, it's one of the highest advertising rate that exists. But for the most part, every one of them, probably 80% of them have humor, or they're funny. They bring in comedians. I mean, there's always so that tells us something, right? Humor works. Humor gets our attention.
Yes.
It raises curiosity. Okay, what is this about? This is funny, or even this is a little uncomfortable, right? But now
Right.
I'm curious. I want to know I want to know where this is going to go, and I think
Yeah.
that's brilliant, and it gets our attention, and that's
Right. Absolutely. It's so true. $6 million for 30 seconds, right? Or seven. I think it's 6.2 at this point. Maybe it's seven with inflation. Who knows? But you think about every single ad. If you even kind of replay in your mind, I mean, people know that experience for the ads at that point are always humorous, right? QuickBooks will come out and have ads about the normal things that they do. But then at that point, when they do the placement of that Super Bowl ad, people know that they're doing an emotional sell. Nobody's trying to get you with like first line logic to kind of say, well, look at our QuickBooks, platform. It's really good. Nobody's doing that. They're selling you herding cats. They're selling you,
yeah.
movie stars with placement at Dunkin' Donuts. They're doing that type of stuff to get you in it because they know it's an emotional sell.
They always wrap a story. I mean, and not to this maybe gets us a little off track, but I think it's important. The best advertising, whether you're using humor or you're pulling emotional strings. Like I remember, I think it was 2 Super Bowls ago. Maybe it was the last. No, I think probably 2 ago. Bruce Springsteen did a great ad, sort of kind of finding common ground, and it was this, it was this really beautiful ad about how divided we are, and of course with Bruce narrating and driving his Jeep, and kind of talking about a chapel in the center of the country where everybody's welcome, and it was this really beautiful ad.
Yep.
But I think, I mean, that's the power of advertising is not to talk, whether you're a company, is not to talk about here are the features, here's how it works. It's to talk about, again, kind of the why you exist. What are we trying to solve for? In that Bruce Springsteen ad, he was trying to solve for, we have more in common than we do than we don't, right? I mean, so in fact, the biggest thing we have, our biggest difference is the fact that we have more in common, right? I mean, so that was a brilliant ad. I think Workday did an ad maybe it was not Workday. It was I can't remember, but they brought in like Paul Stanley from Kiss, and they brought in all the rock stars, and that was like, again, it was super funny, and you're not quite sure what is this all about, but But again, they didn't talk about what they did or what features they had or how companies use them. They
Yes.
actually talked about sort of, if you're a rock star, this is what we stand for, right?
Right.
So it kind of changed
It's
it.
so true. I mean, it's heartstrings, right? It's always heartstrings during the Super Bowl, right? With that limited amount of real estate. Maybe they buy $12 million, whatever, but
Yeah,
30 at a minute, but it's always a heartstring ad because we know that if we can get somebody at the heart, and I say humor, but it could be compassion, it could be empathy, because
yes,
I've seen some of that stuff being played through Super Bowl. And people know there's whether you know this at a subconscious or a conscious level, we know that emotions are a first line path to kind of getting, I hate to say this, but the pocket, right? So, but also I say this not just for the pocket, but just if you know you're in an organization where you need to really move hearts on a project, or this is an effective tool. Whether you use humor, use the heart to kind of get through to people. I mean, sometimes you may have to rebrand your I've been in organizations we've had to rebrand HR, right? HR is looked as kind of like as this evil red stepchild, and we've kind of now needed to kind of say, hey, we're authoritative, we do things, and they would use humor, right? And they would play into the exact stereotype that, and almost joke about that exact stereotype to get to people and go, oh, I know that was a relatability point, right? And saying, we
yeah.
know that you look at us like we're the hire fire team, but we do so much more than that, right? And that gets you. You're like, oh, yeah, I kind of do. But oh, okay, and so you get, and they kind of, and so it's a wise tactic, and it's not just, you cannot just use it in humor, like you said, Dan. It can be used for
Yeah.
the full spectrum of emotions.
So let's kind of transition to this concept of innovation. All organizations want to innovate, right? We all want to be challenging the status quo, whether it's in product that we create, process that we have, people that we're bringing in, teams that we create, whatever it might be, right? The sort of drive for innovation and changing things is, for the most part, a key value of every company that I know.
Yep.
I don't think anybody would say we don't want to innovate.
You don't want to innovate,
So
no.
talk about, how can humor be a tool, and
Yeah.
ultimately, what are some proven problem-solving systems that help to integrate humor that ultimately help to drive innovation?
Yeah. So some people may have heard of this, some people may have not. Improv, right? And so the basic unit, and if I just kind of, let's talk about what improv is. It's really kind of production of something by a team on the fly, where we're delivering constant innovation and value. So
This conversation's improv.
yeah, it absolutely, right. We didn't know we were,
Yeah.
we didn't know where we were going to,
Yeah,
we didn't
yeah.
have direct script onto what we were going to do, and we're working off each other. And kid you not, like as I walk through some of these tenets of improv, you'll see that chemistry exists between you and I. And I think we could even set a good example for other organizations, and other teams that are trying to develop chemistry, whether it's a one-on-one chemistry or it's a team chemistry. But there are things that an improv team, like I said, their innovation unit is a laugh, right? And that production of a laugh has to happen every few seconds, right? People have to be captivated by that. So, and their litmus for not production is that people are just bored, they're turned away, the audience is not engaged. So if we think of a group that does high innovation, on the fly, very agilely, an improv team is that. I'm part of one, and I can tell you that there are a couple tenets. I'm just going to kind of read them off, just because it's good to do. Then we'll kind of dissect them. But one is yes and, right? So with yes and with the team, when we come together as an improv team, we are always idea building, right? So we come together, and with an improv team, this is more agile than even you would do at work, but it's a great example. Like we come in and we're like, hey everybody, welcome to the show tonight. We want to get a one-word suggestion from the audience. Anybody want to throw out an idea? We got unicorn. We didn't know we were going to jam on unicorn. We had to talk about unicorn. We had to weave that through all of our skits and our sets, right? So we would, as people came into our scene, and as team members came in, somebody would have an idea or a position on unicorn, and we had to always accept it. which is a great thing with teams. You always accept people's points of view and their ideas. No one makes mistakes. That's kind of an inherent thing where we kind of say, number one, we're setting trust, we're setting respect inside of the confines of the team. We never block, so we never reject an idea, which is the same thing as, we trust, and we never assume that the person made a mistake that when they put their idea forth, especially if they're pretty emphatic and statement oriented about that piece. Always make your partner look good. That's not just an improv skill, that's a life skill that we should all have. If you do that, you get an annuity for life with that person, right? Which on the same side, if you block a person, like if I were to block your idea or reject your idea, not only am I rejecting your idea, I'm rejecting Dan. And not only am I rejecting Dan, but I'm rejecting all of Dan's annuity and future streams for wanting to collaborate with me. So you think about this really from a nerdy point of view, you really are, you don't want to block. You always want to make your partner look good because you're trying to fulfill that annuity for innovation with them and that collaboration with the team, idea building, and then always wanting to be respectful of change, right? Change happens whether you invoke it as a team, somebody brings a new piece into the skit, or markets, come to you. This is that whole uncertainty thing. And then establish and speak common ground. So we always are quick to, and especially with teams, you can do this where you say, the who, what, and where of what's going on. And that's a great place to go, okay, what's this project or what's this initiative or what does this thing mean to you? And letting people kind of speak and gain consensus as to what that is. We don't want to direct. We want to see everybody's understanding of the problem or the challenge at hand so that we all gain alignment. Because if we don't, we're quickly moving, like this. So I think if teams were to do these things, and even, I spend time with companies doing this in really simple ways. I mean, these sound so simple and and you think it's a lot easier said than done to kind of do these things. But if you need to kind of do a reestablishment or establishment of these things with teams, if you bring these things into play, it creates a great breeding ground for innovation because it creates strong team dynamics where people are supportive and safe with each other. And that's where that innovation is going to happen. So
I love that. We talk about three things that really help to build effective teams, and it's connection, clarity, and meaning. Those are the three elements that we really believe in, and everything that you just said, I think helps to amplify and sort of, fuel all three of those elements, right? It's this idea that kind of the yes and, which I love, and that no one makes mistakes. And the most important thing is, I think with mistakes is if there's always I always like to use the word falling, not failing, and sort of, being there for each other and lifting each other up in those moments to quickly learn. And I think that's kind of where humor can be brought in too.
yeah,
Because I think sometimes you need to have, as a team, or a very direct conversation around what happened, why it happened, but then being able to sort of, have a sense of humor about it too. That's the only way. That's one way, I should say, to move past it, and I think a very healthy and helpful way. And I love the never block concept, and this whole, I think just the kind of people coming together and doing improv. I think what that does too with improv groups is it quickly allows you to get to know each other, right, in different ways. And that trust, you talked about that, to trust each other. And if you have a team that trusts each other more, that knows each other a little bit more, that can laugh with each other a little bit more, that can sort of riff on ideas together. And again, there's no wrong answer or right answer. All of a sudden that creates incredible collaboration, and all that absolutely will drive innovation. It's I don't need to do I don't need to build a scientific model to understand that.
Right. And people think it's just, these are, like you said, that I wrote them down as the 3 C's, but they are that same posture, that same stance, these rules of improv can be applied. In fact, I apply. I have a business where we set technology up for companies. We do systems integration. We're doing heavy, pithy work, and we are using simplified concepts for engagement, right? Through
Yeah.
clarity, connectedness, um, clarity, connectedness, and
It was meaning, but there's C models, and but yes, we can call it.
yeah,
We could call it, um, comprehension. Trying to come up with a C on the fly. Meaning's what
okay, yeah. Well, meaning, clarity,
we didn't want
connected.
to be three C's, but we want to have one M and two C's.
Right? Fourth,
We need to be a little different.
yeah. I mean,
C.
absolutely. You need a little hit. Yeah, I mean, but it's true. I mean, you need that definitioning and that kind of those elements in place because and it doesn't. A lot of people take that stuff for granted, but it really is where that drift happens in politicals. That's when drift happens, and the innovation of the product or the team cohesion or whatever it is. That's where this political stuff happens, where motivations change, where you're going to get this, I call it arbitrage, if you will, where there's a lot of dysfunction that potentially will get presented, and that's where the innovation gets stifled. So I think to your point, like it's a strong thing. I mean, if you can take your organizations and reset them against these confines, it changes the dynamic and the respect and kind of the operating state of a lot of these teams and how they produce an increment for innovation, so.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to give voice to everybody. I mean, the best ideas come from the most unlikely places, typically.
Yes.
And I think we have to, and so we have to create environments, right, where we can harness that reality. And the only way to do that, I mean, humor is a huge piece of that. Obviously, and that helps with psychological safety, and we know the importance of that, and everything that we've been talking about. But if teams show up with sort of one or two strong opinions and everyone else, or there's just sort of there as window dressing, I mean, it's terrible. They shouldn't even be there then. Number one, it should be a group dynamics, group dialogue, and I'm a huge believer in that. And
Yeah.
I think but it's hard. We always talk about building, give everyone a voice and having equal conversation, and everyone's, well, of course. I'm like, well, okay, yes, but in practice, sometimes it's hard because personalities are different. So anyway, the improv example is awesome because it gives everyone a chance to be their authentic self too. We all improv in different ways. We all have different personalities of how we show up with confidence, right?
Yes.
Like what makes me confident. We'll talk about this in a moment here, versus what makes you confident, and sort of where do we get that confidence from? It's very different across everybody. So we need to give everyone their space to find that and bring it into a team dynamic and group dynamic.
You're right. Yeah. Improv does healthily because it just kind of, we're trying to disarm a lot of those things, like you said, the politicals and the, so when you respect the entire team, you're trying to obviate or trying to shut down a lot of that political. Anyway, yeah.
Our next session, I'm just riffing on this right now. I think we need to do one. We need to schedule it, and we need to call it humor and improv. And we'll talk because we like to have conversations and just catch up, but not about what we're going to talk about. We show up, we have words that come to mind, and we just riff. What do you think?
There you go. See, and then we can show how that innovation works. You're showing. I love it. I'm
all right,
there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might completely bomb. Who knows? We might just be like, what word? It's stereo.
Right.
Music. I have a feeling we'll do a pretty good job.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to maybe just the last piece of this is this concept around fear, and this was the title of today. And how do we turn fear into confidence, right? And ultimately, this is necessary during what seems to be consistently, more often than not now, more turbulent times in the workplace and just in society in general. There's a lot going on, a lot to absorb. And we want to achieve some sense of stability as best we can, but understanding that stability is kind of impossible to always have. So,
Right.
so how do we turn fear into confidence so we can sort of manage through turbulence? I guess that might be
Yeah.
the way to think about it. So, what are some of
Exactly.
the thoughts you have, and then maybe I'll provide some examples
Yeah.
too of how I leverage fear into what I do and what I've done in my life.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, good. I thought about this question, how do you take fear and turn it into confidence, almost kind of transform that energy? And, using humor. And so, the group that and just because it's resonant on my mind because of the US Open was people that are high performers that are also in a high learning mode. And so if you think of like the players that we're playing, whether it's Coco or it's one of these Daniel Medvedev or Djokovic or whomever it may be, to get to that level of play, you have to have a strong, resilience to win and loss. And you are in a constant place of fear. You're constantly trying to play yourself up, moving from 500 to 100 to, top 10 in your sport in the world. And also, somebody gets on the court. This is a great improv experience, right? They have no idea how that other player is going to play, right?
Right.
So they've got to they're doing problem solving, pretty adeptly, pretty agilely on the court. So I took that community and I said, let's think about they're constantly operating in somewhat of a high state of fear, that, wanting to be ranked, but then they're also having to kind of exude confidence because tennis is a game of a little bit of the head, right? So, Coco is a great example of when she, not in her final speech, because I know a lot of people know her final speech where everybody says if you were a naysayer, you turn her, the naysay, it was gas to her fire and to make her win. But in her semifinal speech, one of the commentators asked her point blank, she's like, you've got all these odds stacked against you. How do you kind of manage a day? And how do you kind of go into these games? How did you go into this game and win against the number one seeded Russian tennis player in the world? And she was like, I watched a little anime in the morning, and I got my head straight. But she's a really humble person about it, right? And she was like, and you see some of these post game interviews, and you can see the players who are in a high learning, high performative state will use humor, and they take life pretty lightly, and that turns into confidence. Why? Because the audience loves you, right? Coco watches anime, like she's number one tennis player in the world now, and she's watching anime, right? So that kind of gets you like relatable. It makes you lovable to them, and it also disarms them and gives them a level of confidence, right? So. The other example I'll give you is Djokovic, right? He was in second set finals with Daniel Medvedev, and Medvedev fell because he had to take a long shot back, a volley back on one of the balls, and Djokovic saw that he was fine, and he kind of came over the net and he laughed and he handed his hand to like give him hey, that changed the dynamic of the game. At that point, he's trying to be lovable, funny, affectionate to Daniil, his direct opponent, but then he gains a lot of confidence to win the rest of the match, right? From it. So it plays to your benefit sometimes when you kind of extend humor to your recipient, your audience. And yeah.
I mean, I love, I love that example too, because it kind of brings up a whole nother probably topic of competition and being nice and caring is necessary in healthy competition and gives you an edge, right? I mean, like that is, at least I believe some might, if you're, I guess, and they actually create in boxing matches and things like that. It's a little different, but kind of the pre-boxing is always very much like the standoff and the stare off.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, hey man, but actually for the most part, after any fight, and I'm not a huge boxing fan, I don't know, but for the most part, you see a lot of love and for each other, and sort of it's a competition, but at the end, it's sort of respect, right? And
Yes.
it's love, and it's all comes from a good place. So I think if you bring heart into anything, it's only going to benefit you.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I love that example, and for me, fear, like I actually welcome being nervous or being fearful. I find that if I don't have fear about something, that means I'm overconfident. If I'm
Hmm.
not nervous, that probably means I am feeling too overconfident and maybe not as prepared as I should be, right? So when I talk about that feeling of being nervous or being fearful before you have to maybe present to your team, before you have to get on a stage and speak, if that's what you do, or before you have to do anything that you're not comfortable with, or that might be nervous, or that might make you nervous. I always say, you want to feel nervous, you want to have a little bit of fear, but you have to be prepared.
Yeah.
And that's true with like a great tennis player too, right? You don't show up and like, I'm just going to be a good guy, a nice guy on the court, but I haven't practiced in a month, right? You're going to lose. So,
Right.
so because that allows you to quickly overcome it if you're prepared, and that helps drive confidence too. But fear actually kind of gives you that strength, I think, to move forward and show up and be a little more vulnerable and to be a little more authentic. And for me, humor. I'm not necessarily a funny person, but I like when people laugh. I think that creates comfort in the moment. Right.
Yes.
I think when we talked about this last time, you don't have to be a great comedian to use humor in the workplace. Let's just
Right.
so anybody listening to this, you know, we're never suggesting that you have to be extraordinarily funny, and you have to be, like Adam Sandler style funny to make it work. It's just being authentic and kind of being comfortable to go out, off the cuff a little bit. And I
Yeah.
think that's key.
Yeah. I mean, we talked too about like this whole notion around like when you do kind of present and you're going into a room and this whole like here's you and the nervousness and then here's the audience and they're ready to kind of get, and
Yeah.
I always use this metaphor of like, and okay, I need to kind of gel these two things together, right? And I'll
Yes.
use thread as like humor. And so when you quickly come into these conversations and you kind of want to establish like that connectivity, right, with these stitches. And so you do that through humor, right? You're doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for the audience too, because you're doing it, right. And
No, absolutely. And I think there's a little bit of and it's okay to say this, I think a little bit of a selfish side to it, because I know if I can relax and feel more comfortable, then I'm going to present better. And
yes,
therefore, it will be a better experience for those listening. So
absolutely.
but if I can't sort of find a way into that moment, through humor or some story or whatever it might be, typically there's, at least for me, there's humor involved. Um, it makes it really hard to find that, I don't know, to find that groove,
Mhm,
if you
mhm.
will. And so I think that's just for anybody listening. I always, don't be worried about fear or nervousness. In fact, embrace it, and
Yeah,
then leverage tools like humor and everything that we've been talking about, that act in fact gives you strength, that shows more of your true self, your true personality. I think that's so healthy. We have to get back to authentic self and a whole person experience in the workplace, and humor is such a great way to do that. So I always love our conversations.
I know.
um,
Yeah, we could go for every comment that we discuss. I think we could go deeper, like on a couple different levels, but you just have to almost suspend yourself because we've got finite time.
I
So
know, I know, but I think I'm committing right here to everybody that our next one should be just like a
improv.
complete improv. I mean,
Yep.
not that we're not, or but like literally just
Yeah.
come in. We'll treat it more like an improv. It'll be a little experiment. We'll
Yeah.
experiment.
You'll
So
get to see the mechanics of a good operating team too, right? You'll get to watch how we're story building, idea building. I mean, it's a great way to kind of it's a great study in like the concept of improv in action so that you could take that and see watch these things happening, and the idea building and the reinforcement and making the other partner look good. I mean, you get to watch us do that. We're coming completely unscripted. So and you'll get to see us innovate, right? Produce great ideas, evangelize good things, hopefully. So
very confident. If at the least most minimum piece of what happens, we will have a lot of fun doing it. So
yeah.
Well, thank you, Gita, as always. And Gita Kulkarni, and you can find you on LinkedIn, and probably the easiest place. So do connect with her, and we will announce our next improv soon. And any final closing remarks that you have for our wonderful listening audience?
I mean, life's like you use with the inside the first line tag, right? Life's short. Life's short, work is long, humor is efficient, right? Use it. So
Yes, definitely use it. Again, thanks to everyone, and thanks to you, Gita. It's always a pleasure chatting. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, collaborating, working with you. So looking forward to great things ahead, and thanks to everyone, and have an incredible Thursday afternoon.
yes.
And incredible weekend ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks everybody.
Everyone, see ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.